Let's then continue the analysis of this paper and let's go. So, if the person says, I promise to go to the movies with you tomorrow, one has accomplished the commissive illocutionary point with a commissive force. As long as one manages to communicate this in some way, the act has been performed. One has tried to accomplish something to the hearer. Already putting oneself in a commitment with him or her. This person has done so with the degree promise, which is less than degree swear. So swearing is something stronger than promise because in this case you have to put something of value for you, to a bet. So you have to be careful and you have to actually fulfill your promise, otherwise you lose this thing that you value so much. For example, as this puts the speaker into a commitment with a further preparatory condition that one risks the loss of a value that is important to him or her, such as, I swear on my mother, etc. And this characterizes a way of achieving mode promise. This is the mode of achievement. However, the act will only be satisfied if the promise is actually fulfilled if the future events of the promise's content were fulfilled due to the speaker's actions in favor of this outcome. In this case, going to the cinema with the hero tomorrow. The fact that the speaker did not manage to fulfill what he promised does not mean that he was being insincere about his ability or intention to fulfill it. This also does not mean that the speaker uttered nothing. The hero could say, you promised, but you didn't keep it. That was not a promise. It was like you were silent. Searle argues that the act is defined at the moment the speaker decides what he intends to accomplish. And that instant is a fixed and real moment in the world. That's what we call Searle's naive realism. So we have to be careful with this. Every time that we are dealing with language, these people think that the world is real. They are simply ignoring the debate which has no solution, the debate of realism against anti-realism. What is this debate? Realism, you believe that the world exists independently of your perspective. But the problem is, if everyone dies, if everyone is dead already, how could we know that the world exists? We need the perspective to see that the world is existing. On the other hand, we have the anti-realism, in which we would say that, for example, everything in this world is a creation of my mind. For example, you would have to arbitrate in this case a primordial mind, something that is the first mind in the world, at least one, to perceive the world. But of course, that this is a contingency. There's nothing to prove that the world is actually the fruit of my mind. So this is a unsolvable problem. But Searle decides that the realism is the thing that exists. So would the realism be realist? I don't know. If he is accused of lying, this will not remove the pre-existent sincerity that there was in his intention. So, if I couldn't keep the promise, there is a reality that says that I had the intention, a true and sincere intention to fulfill it. Although there's no one to prove it, there's no absolute perspective to say that this is actually true. Even if this reveals an epistemological problem about the following question: how can we know that he was sincere? As we are not omniscient, we say that only the speaker will know, and we should expect accessible evidence to contribute to the elucidation of this fact. So, once again, we are saying that epistemology would be very interesting to this theory. Thoroughly in Expression and Meaning will present the taxonomy of types of illocutionary acts and the goals we can accomplish. For him, that number is exhausted at 5. So he believes that in practice we would hardly have any type of act that does not fit into this classification. Actually, there is a metaphysical proof that we can actually exhaust the options of the interaction between man and the world. In the other list of videos that I have, I was proposing another kind of fit between the speaker and his own soul. You know? That would be like when the music is interacting with my soul, for example, and is making me feel something with its language properties. But it's a very long story. In order to get a better understanding of this classification, however, the notion of directional fit is first necessary. There are 4 directions in the relationship between speech and the world, objects of reality. Language world, when we describe the world as it is, that is, when the content of the enunciation fits the world. So if I say that it's raining, if I see that it's raining, putting all the epistemological problems away, like for example, if we are not considered that I can't be denied or I can't be just, I don't know, wrong about the things that I'm seeing, you know. 2, world language, when the world must adapt to the content of what was stated. So this is the case of promises, for example. I promised you that I will jump, so I have to jump in order to fulfill what I said in this language dimension here. Double direction, when the enunciation under the right conditions transforms and at the same time describes the world as it is. This is the case of declaration. If I have the authority to declare you arrested or condemned for 10 years of prison, because I've said that, you are arrested, because I have the power to make it so. No direction, when the enunciation is irrelevant to the constitution of the world and only expresses psychological states in relation to it. So there's no attempt to fit anything. I'm just saying that I didn't like something, for example. By the way, such directions are actually grounded in an even more fundamental realm than speech acts themselves. Searle, despite having written his work Speech Acts in 1969, noticed only later, in 1983, that the functioning of speech acts was based on a more primitive mental property which he called intentionality, a word that also names the work in which he talks about this property, intentionality, 1983. Intentionality is about our directional capacity, which relates mental states to objects and states of affairs in the world. So the capacity that we have to perceive things and direct our mind to these things is called intentionality by Searle. As the name implies, it is naturally based on this directionality that the directions of fit between mental states and things are founded. And when someone has the intention of performing an illocutionary act and expressing one of these states, an affirmation is an expression of a belief in the truth of the expressed propositional content, or an order that expresses the desire that the hearer perform a future action to the speaker, or a promise that expresses an intention to carry out a future course of action in favor of this hearer. The directions of fit of mental states are transferred to the illocutionary acts performed. So we have a intrinsic relationship between this intentionality in these directions of fit. Nicholas Phocion mentions in the Encyclopedia Britannica 2 very important concepts present in Searle's theory regarding the faculties of the mind and their relationship with the world. They are the network and the background. According to Searle, speech acts do not function in isolation. They are embedded within a network, or unarticulated beliefs and other mental states, and within a background. About the entry, John Searle. In other words, the network connects the various concepts we use in such a way as to allow us to understand, for example, that if someone invites us to go to a restaurant, The person knows that only go to restaurants those who know what it means to be hungry, to have a meal, sitting at the table, money, etc. On the other hand, the background is a more problematic concept. As Daniel Barbiero says in the Dictionary of Philosophy of Mind, in the entry background, Searle had to define, to avoid infinite regress, that we represent representations in order to understand them. A non-representational plan, assuming this negation is no longer a representation. So this is already problematic. The guy is trying to define the representation itself, but he has to represent a non-representational plane. Of course, that this is represented, right? And another regress would arise. This is why this is problematic, on which we have a deep dimension and another local dimension. Deep down, the human mind must be able to perform innate and universal skills. There would be a lack of representation, such as walking, eating, and simply seeing in order to not bump into things. In the local dimension, the human mind must be able to identify some objects and behavior that are almost naturally recognizable in a given culture or minimally defined society, such as knowing that a fork serves to bring a food from a plate to one's mouth. Without these primary elements of the mind, we would not be able to perform any kind of speech act, direct or indirect, and therefore Searle defends the primacy of the mind over language. So we would need to have the mind and the intentionality to afterwards define the speech acts. Isn't the guy realizing that he had to put a name and thus using language to defend that the mind has come before the language? Of course, that this is a contradiction. Back to the classification, we have assertives, which describe the world and present reasons in doing that, and therefore have direction of fit one. Example: affirm, assert, describe. Directives, whose function is to make the other carry out something of the speaker's desire or order, and therefore have direction of fit two with regard to the hearer. The latter's action must suit the content of the enunciation. Command, ask, pray. Commissives, which commit the speaker to a certain future course of his action, and therefore have direction of fit two with regard to the speaker. The latter's action must suit the content of the enunciation. So these two are very interesting, commissive and directive, because we are dealing with the same direction of fit, the direction two, because both of them are trying to adapt their actions to the language. This is different from this case, in which we are trying to adapt the language to the world. So we have these differences. So, like for example, if I promise to you, I must act as my language has said to do it. Consent, threaten, etc. Declaration allows us to define a feature of the world under the right conditions, which automatically describes it and therefore have direction of fit 3. Declare, name, indicate. So when I say something, I am already transforming the world as I am saying. Lastly, we have the expressives, which merely express a psychological state relative to a certain presupposed state of affair, which would be the naive realism of Searle, that suppose that the world exists without our perception, not adding, as in directives, concepts, and declarations, or taking away, as in assertives, any aspect in or of the world, and have therefore direction of fit 4. Apologize, thank, congratulate. So that's why we have only 5 types of illocutionary acts, because they are related to the 4 directions of fit. One of them is this one. 2 of the illocutionary acts have the same direction of fit. The third one has another one, and the last one has the last one. Expressive has the direction 4. So that's why we cannot say more than 4 types of acts with our language. With this in mind, we can visualize why there are only 5 types of illocutionary points, since there are only 4 ways of interacting with the world through language, and considering the fact that directives and comsives differ only in that future action of the propositional content must be carried out respectively by the hearer and the speaker. Counting as 2 types of objectives, we have 3 assertives, declarations, expresses, plus 2 directives, comsives. 5 ways of performing an action through language, and no more. Knowing this, we are able to perform all kinds of illocutionary acts directly. That is, when we intend to perform each of these actions, we literally use the so-called performative verbs, such as those in the examples given above, for this purpose. It is worth remembering that more than one verb of this type is capable of meeting the same objective of the speaker. For example, whoever says or describes practices the same assertive act, but the first has a greater degree of strength than the second. So asserts or describes. This assertion has a greater degree of strength. Although it is the same goal, they want to achieve the same goal. If the speaker has good evidence to choose to assert rather than just describe, he will have this action attempt with greater efficiency. So you are not obligated to do this, but if you want to have more efficiency, do it. A more convincing power, that is, a greater degree of strength of the elocutionary goal. So we will have to make now a relationship between these theories that we have seen. The implicature and the speech acts. We are going to see also what are the indirect speech acts too. So let's put this thing to the another video and see you next time. Don't forget to like and share this with your friends to learn more about languages. Bye bye.